Every day, we work to save lives and alleviate suffering among some of the world's most vulnerable populations. We can do that job only if we have the full trust of the countries and peoples we serve. That trust must never be jeopardized by despicable acts like sexual exploitation and abuse. The United Nations has zero tolerance for such behavior. It is our collective responsibility to uphold the highest standards and protect all those we serve.
The UN is the ray of hope. It is frequently what people are so looking forward to, is to have the blue helmets come in to save them.
Poverty exists almost everywhere the UN operates. Where there is desperation, buying sex is cheap and easy. Some UN personnel and aid workers have reportedly exchanged as little as a piece of fruit for a sexual favor. These girls had sex with UN workers who tempted them with cartons of milk.
We were walking home from school when a driver in a UN car pulled over. The driver told me he loved me. He had pints of milk in the back of his car, which he gave to my friend and me.
The girls had sex just a few times with these men, and both became pregnant. Since then, their families have cast them out of their homes, and the men have abandoned them. Soon they will have to drop out of school to care for their children, but with no qualifications or money, they don't know how they or their children will survive.
I can't imagine ever meeting with him again. I don't even remember what he looks like.
Survival sex is one in which women have no choice, where they believe that the only way that they're going to make any money, where they'll be able to keep their job or get a job, is through engaging in sex or in relationships with individuals. It is by no means a relationship of equals.
When acts of sexual exploitation and abuse are carried out by the UN, it is a double betrayal. Not only does it betray the trust of the individual, but it also betrays the trust of the world community. The consequences are enormous.
The UN come here to bring peace and security, to fight evil. But they leave behind white children in quarters and in the villages, abandoned without aid or support.
Mikhail is 3 months old. His father is a UN worker who used to give his mother biscuits in exchange for sex. When she became pregnant, he left and has not been heard from since.
The father of Mikhail used his financial power. He said, "You become my friend, you pay me a visit." Every time she came, he would give her a little something, some food, nothing significant, just enough to live on for one day.
Mikhail's mother survives on less than $1 a day by selling bananas. Now this money must stretch to feed and clothe Mikhail as well. But growing up in poverty will not be his only problem. But unfortunately, in many refugee camps where families have fled for safety, United Nations and humanitarian personnel have also sexually abused them.
Oftentimes you arrive in a country where the impunity for abuse is so raw, is so there, is so on the surface. And there are people on our side, in our house, that take advantage of those situations.
In almost all situations where the UN operates, it is poverty that will drive people to sell sex. The majority of victims are women and girls.
Families are often so poor, the only way that they can make a living is by selling their daughter, or son in some cases, but primarily their daughters, to some middleman under some pretext, and then the girl or boy, would end up in some kind of prostitution racket.
You give me $1, I'm going to give my children from me my home.
Freddie is a teenager, and he is also a pimp. He makes his living by selling girls to UN workers. His customers normally ask for young girls, which he finds for them in bars and brothels around the city.
What age of women are they asking for?
They would point at the girls on the beach and say, "I like that one," or the other one. They would point to a tall girl, but she wasn't very old. I'd look for girls who had young faces, not mothers. I'd then go and talk to these women, and if they knew they'd get money, they'd come to the camp, and then I'd get my money and leave them alone.
I have got many from there because me, I always come towards the center of town. And if I get one, I go with him. If he only ejaculates once, then he gives me $5 or $10 or even $20, and then I go back and look for others.
Amal was 16 when she boarded a plane from her home in Morocco. She thought she was heading to Europe to work as a waitress. Instead, she was trafficked to Liberia, where she was forced to work as a prostitute.
After 1 week at Sugar Club, I was no more a virgin. I have lost my virginity. My country is Arabic, Muslim. For me, this is a big problem.
At the time, Amal thought that the only people who could save her were the UN. She described her relief when she saw a UN car pull up outside the club. But the driver wasn't coming to save her. Instead, Amal told us that he raped her and then reported to the brothel owner that she was trying to escape.
It's vital that no one, United Nations personnel or other humanitarian workers, it's very important that they do not buy prostituted sex because it's dangerous. It's dangerous, first of all, because it attracts criminals. It attracts criminals because they see that this is an environment where they can make money. It attracts them because they see a market. This fuels the trade and trafficking of women and children, and we must not be a magnet.
Some people think they are helping when they buy sex. They're not. Buying sex harms individual women and children. It also encourages criminal activity. When children enter the sex industry, they become trapped in a dangerous world from which it is almost impossible to escape.
There has been a big increase in underage prostitution. We think that this is because children were separated from their parents during the war. They could not easily get food and were dependent on UN agents for food aid.
Unfortunately, there are individuals in the humanitarian profession who profit from their position of power to exploit children, and even cases of pedophiles who target humanitarian organizations for employment so they may have access to children.
It's both an internal management responsibility vis-à-vis our own staff, but it's also a development partnership with all other development actors to try to do the best we can to prevent this.
Back to Kenya for 3 times, some people 2 times.
Reporting acts of sexual exploitation and abuse is essential and can go a long way to restoring pride in the work and in the name of the United Nations.
As a woman, I feel proud because seeing the people that you're working with behave so well and having no problem with the UN, it makes you proud because, you know, at least even with yourself, you can depend on them as brothers. Because if they can be able to respect the other women from the other societies, I'm so sure they can be able to respect you too.
We want all of us in this area of work to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And silence makes us part of the problem.
It's simply unacceptable from a moral standpoint and a political standpoint that we stand by and let it happen. And so it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to ensure that this phenomenon does not persist in UN peacekeeping or in any UN presence around the globe.
The United Nations exists to end suffering and restore human dignity. Sexual exploitation and abuse by our own people harms those we are there to assist. It is unacceptable. Together, let us serve with pride. Let us live up to the trust and hope of those who depend on the United Nations and on us.
One of my most unforgettable experiences has been listening to the victims of rape, sexual violence, exploitation and abuse. Their haunting stories and chilling testimony will stay with me forever. Such acts of cruelty should never take place. And certainly no person serving with the United Nations in any capacity should be associated with such vile and vicious crimes. And indeed, the vast majority of UN troops and personnel serve with pride, dignity and respect for the people they assist and protect, very often in dangerous and difficult conditions and at great personal sacrifice. Yet, our organization continues to grapple with the scourge of sexual exploitation and abuse, despite great efforts over many years to address it. We need a new approach. In my inaugural speech as Secretary General, I pledged to work closely with Member States on structural, legal and operational measures to make zero tolerance a reality. And in my first week as Secretary General, I established a high-level task force with an urgent task to develop an ambitious new approach to prevent and respond to sexual exploitation and abuse committed by those serving under the UN flag. Today, I am presenting those proposals for consideration by the General Assembly. And my report outlines a victim-centered strategy rooted in transparency, accountability, and ensuring justice. It is based on 4 tracks. First, to put the rights and dignity of victims first. Second, to focus on ending impunity for those guilty of crimes and abuses. Third, to draw on the wisdom and guidance of all those who have been affected, civil society, local communities, and others, to strengthen and improve our efforts. And fourth and finally, to raise awareness and share best practices to end this scourge. Since exploitation is also deeply rooted in gender inequality and discrimination, we must work to promote gender balance throughout the UN family and in our missions and peacekeeping forces. This will advance parity while decreasing incidents of abuse. I am confident that we can meet these goals together. Let us do so in the name of all who look to the United Nations for life-saving protection and support, and on behalf of the tens of thousands of United Nations personnel around the world who deliver that assistance with courage and commitment to the highest ideals. Let us declare in one voice, we will not tolerate anyone committing or condoning sexual exploitation and abuse. We will not let anyone cover up these crimes with the UN flag. Every victim deserves justice and our full support. Together, let us deliver on that promise.